Welcome to this special holiday edition of Everyday Heroes. Today, we commemorate the birth of our country with a look back at the events that led us to freedom and independence. We'll tour the world-famous Smithsonian Museum and hear from the brave men and women of our armed forces. We'll get their reflections on what it takes to defend our country. We'll also hear from some of our nation's sports heroes on why the 4th of July is one of the most important dates on the calendar. All that and much more on Everyday Heroes. Hello everyone, welcome to Everyday Heroes. I'm Brad Wright, and for the next 30 minutes, come along with me as we take a trip across the United States. We'll visit some of our country's most iconic landmarks, and we'll take a closer look at this holiday through the eyes of our heroes, from the battlefield to the baseball diamond. This Independence Day marks America's 243rd birthday, and that means extravagant celebrations from coast to coast. An estimated $7 billion will be spent this year on the 4th of July, as this annual American tradition brings out people of all ages for fireworks, barbecues, and parades. Many of the biggest celebrations will take place in Washington, D.C. Each year, hundreds of thousands of visitors from all over the country converge on our nation's capital for some of the best holiday experiences. For the brave men and women of our armed forces, the 4th of July serves as a time to reflect and appreciate everything that makes America great.
The 4th of July is a different kind of celebration. The 4th of July celebrates, probably next to the Bible, the greatest document in the history of mankind. This country, we're no better than any other people. Now, because of that document, we are an exceptional people. That document keeps us in a lane that produces excellence that the world has never seen. And America is exceptional for three reasons. We are exceptional because we are a competitive country, we are a compassionate country, and America is a courageous country. We're competitive in everything, sports, our whole government system, free enterprise system is set up on competition. People who are willing to compete to be the best they can be. And our compassion, we see that throughout the world in terms of what Americans give to the rest of the world for their welfare and their health and their well-being. And then our courage, of course, the courage of the American people is responsible for most of the freedoms in the world today. So those three things, which are an offspring of the 4th of July, which is an offspring of that great document, the Declaration.
The events that led to the Declaration of Independence took place in Boston. Back in the 1700s, the city played a central role in our nation's history as it became an important military objective for both the British and the colonists. At that time, Boston Harbor was the main port for importing and exporting goods and supplies. Various parliamentary acts that were passed to regulate trade in the colony directly affected the port and the merchants in Boston, which is what prompted their strong reactions and protests in the city.
The Boston Tea Party has a lot of myths and misconceptions of actually what happened. A couple, they thought the ships were British. The ships were not British. They did not belong to the crown. They were colonial ships. They were colonial owned, meaning they were part of the colonies. And the tea on board was East India Tea Company. It wasn't British tea, although they owned it. It came from China. Another misconception about the Boston Tea Party is that it was over taxes. It really had nothing to do with taxes and tea as much as it had to do with representation. The Magna Carta simply stated that no British subject should be taxed without their consent from Parliament. And that's what was going on. We wanted a voice at the table. Taxation without representation is tyranny.
Allen West is a combat veteran, a former member of Congress, and a constitutional historian who points out that the determination and sacrifice of our forefathers set the foundation for the United States to evolve into the greatest country in the history of civilization.
The courage that it took to stand up to the greatest military power that the world knew at that time, I mean, that's unconscionable. To say that this little simple idea that we want to be free, we do not want to live under the yoke of tyranny, and that we're willing to stand up against you. And the early defeats that they suffered, but yet they continue to believe in that cause.
The relationship between baseball and America is a love affair that has now spanned 3 different centuries. When we come back, we'll head to the ballpark to talk to some of Major League Baseball's top stars to find out why playing the game they love on Independence Day is one of the highlights of the season.
Everyday Heroes is brought to you by Allegro Marinades. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook to learn how to make life taste better.
Each year, Major League Baseball continues its long-standing tradition of playing on this special holiday. In fact, 80 years ago, one of our most revered athletes gave a speech that even today is considered one of the most memorable in professional sports history. July 4th, 1939 was a bittersweet day for the man known as the Iron Horse of baseball. After starting a then Major League record 2,130 games straight, his health slowly and savagely began to decline. 36-year-old Lou Gehrig had recently been diagnosed with ALS. With his health rapidly deteriorating, he stood by humbly in awe of the recognition. A rare neurological disease was taking away the power and speed that had made him arguably the greatest first baseman in the history of the game. On this day, the Yankees organization honored him in front of a sellout crowd at Yankee Stadium, making his number 4 the first number ever retired in the history of Major League Baseball. The humble and reserved native of New York had to be nudged by manager Joe McCarthy to step up to the microphone to say a few words to an adoring crowd.
Today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth.
Now, 80 years later, players of today's generation echo those sentiments and look forward to playing in front of a crowd that's as electric as opening day.
I think every place, every stadium I've ever played in, every stadium I've ever seen is sold out. Most people want to go to a barbecue and a baseball game, and I do it the opposite way around. I go to the baseball game first and then go to the barbecue, but it's an honor to wear the Major League jersey on that day with special patches and socks and hats, and for what it all symbolizes is an honor.
To me, I think of The Sandlot, the movie The Sandlot, and getting some hot dogs and going to the park with your friends as a kid and trying to go and ultimately in the Sandlot and play a game of baseball. Now it's travel ball games and everything like that, and for us, we get to perform on the biggest stage, which is great.
The crowd kind of breeds the energy, so and whenever you can play in front of a sellout crowd, whether it's a weekend or a rivalry or a holiday, putting on different unis and representing for a different reason, definitely special. Definitely allows for that adrenaline to pump a little bit more.
In the 20th century, many of the game's greatest players unselfishly put their careers aside to serve our country in World War I, World War II, and the Korean War. Some of the more notable participants included legendary figures such as Bob Feller, Joe DiMaggio, Stan Musial, and Ted Williams. Each were a part of a group labeled the Greatest Generation. Their desire to serve their country was not fueled by fame or recognition, but because it was simply the right thing to do. These men were shaped in large part by the Great Depression and the profound economic and social turmoil that arose from those difficult times. Each of those players were heroes to a young man named Patrick Brady. Growing up in rural South Dakota, Brady idolized these Hall of Fame players and had dreams of following in their footsteps.
When I was young, my ambition was to be a Major League Baseball player. I coached baseball, I played baseball, and the great heroes of my youth were baseball players. Of course, Babe Ruth, unarguably the greatest ball player that ever lived, in every way. And then the great patriotism that came about as a result of these great people that we admired. People like Ted Williams, who gave up the prime years of his career to go and fight for America. Think what he would have done if he had not taken 4 years out of the prime of his life, what he had done statistically in baseball. Bob Feller did the same thing. The great career that he had, Hall of Fame, it would have been so much greater if he had not taken 4 years out of his life. So baseball represents patriotism.
That patriotism is on display each summer at Major League parks across the country. For the talented athletes who've reached their dreams of playing on the biggest stage, it's extra special to play in front of friends and family. The bond between baseball and our military dates back more than 100 years and will always have a special place in the hearts of Americans. All right, it's time for a break, but stay with us because when we come back, we'll take you to our nation's capital and a visit to the Smithsonian Museum. It's a tour you won't want to miss. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Brad Wright. Last year, more than 30 million people visited the 19 museums that comprise the world-famous Smithsonian Institution. Here you'll find many of our country's most important artifacts, known literally around the world. The Spirit of St. Louis, the iconic ruby red slippers that Dorothy wore in The Wizard of Oz. Much of our nation's history is preserved here. It is one of the many must-see tourist attractions in the United States. Throughout the course of the year, as many as 9 million visitors will pass through this awe-inspiring collection of American history. As you might expect, Independence Day is annually one of the museum's busiest days.
Labor Day and the 4th of July are pretty much our big days here at the museum. And it conjures up a lot of questions from the crowd.
Larry McKinley is a retired medic who served in Vietnam and Desert Storm. Today, he's a tour guide and is quick to point out the Huey helicopter as one of the most fascinating objects for daily visitors.
Often I see people that are about as old as me, standing on a ramp, just staring at it. And I'm going, I think I know what's going on in their head. It's the sound. The Huey had a sound that was unique, okay? It was that whop of the rotor blades. And what it meant to people, it was different. Some, it meant medical evacuation, medical aid ready for them, okay, and en route to the hospital. Others, it meant, ammunition's finally coming. Others, it meant, hey, there's more troops to help us because there's more bad guys than we thought. And then finally, it could mean, oh my goodness, because there's more bad guys than we thought, now we're going to get back into the cantonment area so they could save our life. The sound brings all those memories back.
Each Independence Day on Coney Island means one thing, a hot dog eating contest at the famous Nathan's Hot Dogs, and it's quite a spectacle for those who've never seen this one-of-a-kind event. Nathan's first opened for business on July 4th, 1916. Nathan's promoter, Mortimer Matz, claimed that on that day, 4 immigrants held a hot dog eating contest at Nathan's famous stand on Coney Island to settle an argument about who was the most patriotic. Little did they know then that something that started off with a friendly wager would blossom into an event that would become synonymous with the 4th of July.
So this area certainly fills in, just physically, the geography here changes. It's just bodies everywhere, up and down these streets, 30,000+ people here for the 4th of July. And people fly in from around the country. It's not just New Yorkers, and people fly in from around the world. I mean, we see people from the UK and all parts of the globe that come here because it's kind of a bucket list thing. The 4th of July hot dog eating contest is part of the fabric of the Independence Day holiday. And this event is kind of like a Mardi Gras kind of thing, running of the bulls. People want to come.
On the Northern Plains, Mount Rushmore is a favorite summer destination for many tourists. But for the last decade, the 4th of July has been without a traditional firework display.
We're just starting the process. We need to go step by step to determine what is the most safe environment that we could possibly present fireworks.
The National Park hasn't hosted the big celebration since 2009 due to the high risk of wildfire danger. A pine needle infestation that year killed off hundreds of thousands of trees. With some work to do, that could all change.
So May 6, 2019, the National Park Service and the Department of the Interior signed an agreement to look at reinstating fireworks at Mount Rushmore.
Although the monument sees 28,000 people per day in the summer, those who pass through are excited about the potential return of fireworks to one of America's most iconic landmarks.
Well, Mount Rushmore is always the place to be. It doesn't matter what day of the year it is, but particularly when you're talking about the 4th of July or Independence Week, you're talking about the ideas of democracy and freedom and what those concepts mean, and this is the ideal spot to do that.
Time for us to take another break, but don't go away because when we come back, we'll talk to some of our veterans. and get their perspective on Independence Day when Everyday Heroes returns.
Everyday Heroes is brought to you by Allegro Marinades. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook to learn how to make life taste better.
Thanks again for keeping it here on Everyday Heroes. The relationship between our military and the 4th of July goes all the way back to 1776, but for veterans who have fought in the most recent wars, the day itself brings about mixed emotions. Hot dogs on the grill, backyard barbecues, and of course fireworks lighting up the night sky. These are the images many of us associate with Independence Day. But for some veterans, the massive fireworks shows all across the nation evoke haunting memories of the rockets' red glare and bombs bursting in air that Francis Scott Key poetically immortalized when he wrote the Star-Spangled Banner.
As a veteran, particularly a combat veteran, having experienced the price of freedom, Independence Day does have a brand new meaning, a renewed meaning. As a child, it was always one of naivety and joy. It still is, but there's certainly a more solemn aspect to it. The memories and the trauma from those battles, the things that you just don't seek to remember all the time, come back into reality. They become real each 4th of July. So hearing the fireworks in the distance, that's immediately evocative of a very real situation.
James McLuhan is a retired medic who was awarded the Medal of Honor in 2017 for his heroism on the battlefield in Vietnam. The native of South Haven, Michigan, saved at least 10 lives over the course of an intense 2-day battle. Though it's now been almost 50 years since his time on the battlefield, the 4th still brings home some haunting memories.
Those fireworks are very real to me. The fireworks that I saw in combat and on a hill that's being attacked. Matter of fact, I was on a hill once during my tour that was overran by the NBA, and the people that were watching from miles away said it looked like the 4th of July. When my children were small, I had to give them the opportunity to enjoy that. So I would just prepare myself for that and go and put things in perspective as to what it was for them instead of what it reminded me of.
Independence Day is one of the many holidays veterans refuse to take for granted after returning home or while serving abroad.
It's tough being away from family during the times you're supposed to be with them. But at the same time, what I always told myself when I was over there is that part of what we're doing here is preserving that life. I always kind of just try to reassure myself that there's going to be more of these, that I'm missing this one, but there's going to be one next year.
I remember being stationed over in Vicenza, Italy, and on American Independence Day. And this was back when we didn't have to worry about terrorist threats or anything. We'd open up, and the Italians would they'd be lined up to come on and share and be with the Americans on their Independence Day. Because I think everybody has a connection to America because of that ideal that we represent and how so many people have left their homes and left other countries to come here to be a part of this incredible experiment in liberty, freedom, and democracy. So we are a beacon that so many people look up to and so many people share in that Independence Day that we have, just the same as so many people were hurt when they saw America attacked on 9/11. And so we must understand that, and we must take pride in ourselves to always celebrate the independence of these great United States of America.
And thanks to the service of our nation's veterans, America's Independence Day will continue to be celebrated for years to come. Thanks again for joining us here today on Everyday Heroes. America was built on the backs of strong and courageous young men and women who valued liberty, opportunity, and political freedom enough to risk everything to make America what it is today. As a country, we are forever indebted to the sacrifices that each was willing to make. We hope you've enjoyed today's show. For everyone who's been a part of it, I'm Brad Wright. Have a safe and a happy Independence Day.